Yesterday, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, held a special press briefing here in New York about climate change. The Secretary General recently had traveled to the Arctic for a first-hand look at the impact of climate change. Among those in attendance at yesterday's press briefing was Rafael Pi Roman, a correspondent and producer for WNET.org, the public broadcaster here in New York, and he joins us now with more on what the Secretary General had to say. And we get to see one another each day, but we don't usually get the luxury to talk. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Martin. It's good to be here.
This meeting that you attended came about as a result of some frustration that the Secretary General had. Explain that.
That's right. He had a press conference earlier, I think early in the day, where he hoped to talk about climate change, but most of the questions were about Iran. And I think he wanted to talk about climate change, so he called for this more intimate meeting with about 8 reporters, and that's what we talked about mostly.
And clearly he believes then that the issue of climate change supersedes right now the momentary one of what to do about Iran.
That's what he said. He said the issue of climate change is more important than Iran. When we pushed him on that, he said, look, it's more important at the end of the day because while you can negotiate with Iran, no matter how difficult, you cannot negotiate with nature about climate change.
No, well, he's got a very strong point there. There's some nations there, he felt, that have really stepped up to the plate when it comes to climate change.
He's very optimistic about the moves that Japan and China have made. Specifically, the new Prime Minister of Japan has pledged to reduce carbon emissions by 25% by 2020, something that Japan didn't want to do before. And the President of China said that he was willing to tackle energy intensity, as he called it, as long as it's tied with serious climate change agreements by the developed countries.
Yeah, these are the second and third largest economies in the world,
Exactly.
So they would be seen as very influential. President Obama had a historic role at the United Nations session this time around. And I'm wondering, how did the Secretary General view that?
The Secretary General mentioned that more than once. He mentioned it a few times, how happy he was about President Obama's role at the United Nations, how he's re-engaging with the United Nations. He thought that was a very, very good move.
And yet at the same time, he said it cannot be expected that the U.S. leads on this issue.
That's right. He said specifically to the European Union and other developed nations not to expect the United States to lead on this issue because this country's economy is so complex, the politics is so complex, and because we're in this process a little later than most of the other countries.
And I know, he was frustrated about the issue of Iran, but I can't let it go without asking, did he give some insight about his feelings regarding the issue of Iran and its nuclear program?
Well, he seems to think it's still a very open question whether Iran's desire for nuclear power is for peaceful means or not. And he said it's up to Iran to prove that it is.
Rafael Pi Roman, good to talk with you. Thank you.
Martin, nice to be here.